that it sorry guys. Just the main reason that it's just so much faster. And then Lightroom Classic, which is what I'm using as the program, I can do things where I can like literally grab onto the histogram, like who's that Daniela was asking about. And like there's just so much other ways that you could just make it faster in that sense. But that's gonna come with time, right? I think like, when you're just starting, using something like Lightroom Mobile makes a lot of sense because it gives you so much power in terms of editing because it gives you everything that you need for the most part. I mean, you don't have to pay for it. I will say that if you're interested in photography and that's something that you want to get into and do more of, I mean, buy one less coffee a month, like buy one less vape, and you can afford the mobile program. But I'm not sponsored or anything by Adobe, so please do what you like, right? It's really what you are into. There is another app that I would recommend for the most part if you wanted something that's free and simple. It is another phone app. I believe you can use it for iPad as well. It's called Snapseed. I'm gonna type it into the chat real quick. Sheet is site. So it's a free editing app from Google. When it comes to the advanced editing assignment, I think that's number 12, a little bit later on for the course. I ask you to do some advanced editing techniques, so that could be like object removal, vignetting, different things. Snapseed has some a little bit more free things for it. But once again, this kind of comes to utility and functionality. It will work, right? If you have a simple like object removal like job, like Snapseed will work, right? But will it work the best? Will it be the most efficient? Will it be the cleanest, right? Because when it comes to editing, at least for me, a big ethos of mine and just a lot of my work is the word seamless, right? Seamless, meaning like you cannot really see the edits that I did because if you can see the edits that I did, then I would feel as the viewer, you kind of get taken out of it, right? Have you ever looked at a photo and you're like, wow, this feels really edited. This feels like a little too like real or just it doesn't make sense, right? And that stuff like that stands out to us. Like that is important to pay attention to because or at least for well, sorry, once again, photography is relative, right? It depends on your work and what it is you want to do and how you want it to look, right? I don't ever want to stifle anybody's creative like, intuition or instincts. But I think that, subtlety goes a long way, make the most of it and just kind of try to make it just blend in well. But that's going to take time, guys. Just like with everything, just like how you're going to take thousands and thousands of photos in your life. If you want to get better at editing, you're going to have to edit hypothetically thousands and thousands of photos, right? I'm not asking you to edit thousands and thousands of photos for this class. I think the amount of photos you guys are going to have to edit for this class is pretty reasonable. And it's going to be pretty straightforward, right? I'm not expecting you guys to do like every single thing that I show you today. But I think once you understand the utility and how to apply it, it's really going to make a big difference for those that are really into editing or those that really want their work to look something other than what it came out in the camera, right? First things first. Okay, I think that's the last person. Hello, everybody. Good morning one more time. If everybody can just turn on their cameras real quick so I can make sure you are all. Oh, that might be the last person, that you are all here. I see some of you already. Thank you, thank you. All right, and I think we have everybody here. Sorry for the scare this morning, guys. Daylight savings is not a thing in Hawaii, so therefore I never remember. But I'm glad it worked in everybody's favor because I would have felt like an idiot if I was the one an hour late. So, good morning, guys. Thank you, thank you. I'm just waiting on Ashley. I just got to see your face real quick, Ashley, and then sweet. Hi, thank you. And then if you guys want to turn it back off, you're totally fine. I just needed to see that you're there. Okay. Okay, so guys, I'm gonna go into editing, right? So editing photos. Now, after teaching, I don't know, I've taught over like 1,500 people in person for the last 4 years doing the in-person class for Classroom Au Pair. And a lot of what I've figured out in terms of how to teach editing stems from a lot of the struggles that I've seen my students go through, as well as, just things for myself, right, that I've had to really learn and figure out, right? So I'm going to show you what I think is a very straightforward and easy to adopt, like order of things for you to look go through editing. Now, I will say just use this as a template for right now. This doesn't have to be what you do for the rest of your life, right? Because things are going to change. They're going to add more options. AI is going to get even better, right? So you're going to have a lot more different ways to edit in the future. And, for those that don't want to use Lightroom and you're using like the photo editing, like the actual editing in like your iPhone, whatnot, that's okay. If you really like light, simple editing. But once again, like, you might be tended to use a filter, which you can't do anything to, which isn't going to teach you anything, right? But that doesn't necessarily make it wrong. Um, my point is, guys, challenge yourself as much as you want to be challenged, right? If you really want to learn something like editing, then try to just use Lightroom. It's free, right? You don't have to pay for it. I'm not asking you to pay for anything. They don't pay me to say anything like that either, right? But other than that, just have fun with it, right? Like figure out what works for you, figure out your color palette, because like, when it comes to style as well, I've had a few, I've had a few complaints from some students in the past. They're like, oh, I felt like I wasn't shown how I can develop my own personal style, right? Things like that, especially when it comes to like editing and just photography in general. That stuff, I mean, like style is super relative. Once again, photography is super relative. Like I can't teach you to be you as an individual, as a creative, right? How you approach editing is going to be entirely up to what you think is beautiful, like the colors that you like, the lack of color, the excess of color, like etc. Right? I can go on forever about that. Right? But just take it slow, right? Take it slow, right? Because the way that I want you to think about this is that we're going to spend time on one photo, right? The one photo, ideally, figure that out, get your settings right. Then after we get that photo down, we're going to make a preset. After we make that preset, we literally just go to the next photo and then we're going to apply it. And instead of having to change everything, right, there's things that we can start with to make it a lot easier, right? Because it's not going to be exact per photo, but I think you might be surprised as to how often and how many different scenarios you can use your presets in if you're not if you haven't been using presets or anything like before, right? And they're good to have. I mean, once you start making them, make as much as you want. There isn't really a limit, right? Just remember how uh, how different they are from each other, right? If they're just slight variations from one thing to another, right? You might just want to kind of condense it, right? First things first, though, before I go off, questions. Does anybody have any questions about editing or things that they're struggling with or something that they're hoping to get out of from today? Anybody? Thumbs up if you're good, guys. Thumbs up. Okay. I'll take the thumbs up. All right. I'm just gonna get into it, guys. Thank you. Well, I asked. Okay, hold on. Share this one. Okay. Sweet. All right. So let's pick a different. Well, actually, no, I'll just go on through this. Okay, guys. So this is my wedding work. Why is this not working? Okay. So this is my wedding work. I work within the commercial elopement industry in Hawaii, so I'm doing weddings like pretty much every day. This is just like a rough one of my presets that I've thrown on here. You can see some of the different names that I have over here, right? So, well, first things first. So this is going to be in Lightroom Classic, guys. If you look here on the right, the sliders are going to be the same name, right? This is the histogram up here, right? This is my color temperature and everything here. So what you're going to be using, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second, is going to be Lightroom Classic, right? So let me pull it up on my phone. I just want to show you exactly where certain things are. And once again, I have to do this through my phone, so please bear with me. Let's pull up just any random photo. Oh, I don't know. I have to search for it. All right, let's do this one, some beach one. Okay, guys. So in Lightroom Classic, right, you have all these tabs on the bottom, right? It's going to focus in there a little bit. So we're pretty much going to go in order, right, for when it comes to editing. So we're going to go down from like where it says light, and then you're going to go into color, and then all that other stuff. That's going to be like extra, just effects, details, little things you can add to your photos that make them a little bit more personalized or do things with contrast, right? But pretty much, honestly, you're essentially just kind of going down the line. right? I know that's not rocket science. I know that's not exactly like groundbreaking in terms of like a process, right? But I think it's honestly probably the most straightforward way for you to go through editing. That's going to make the most sense, right? Because there are so many options that you have to edit, so many sliders that you can pick from, and some of them do very similar things in a certain way, right? But you don't need everything, right? Just because it's all there, you don't need everything, right? It's you really have to pay attention to your photo and then think about what you want to change, what stands out to you. And then you have to just kind of think about, okay, how do we fix that? Right? Because with editing, essentially what you're doing is you are revealing information where you want to reveal information in your image to your viewer. And then once we reveal information, right, if we're taking up the shadows or we're taking down the highlights, for example, right, essentially you're kind of taking away contrast or even think of it more as exposure, right? You're taking away exposure from those parts of the image so that you can reveal them more. And then if you like contrast, right, then we're going to have to add exposure back hypothetically into those areas using things like contrast, the curve tool, clarity, whatever it might be, to push the detail back where you want it, right? So with editing, the first step I want you to think of, right? The first thing is you're gonna go through what I call global edits, meaning think about the word global, you're editing the whole image, right? You're gonna start with the big picture itself, right? After you edit the whole image, then we're gonna go into more granular parts of editing, right? So after we go through our global edits, then I'm gonna go into contrast, right? And the reason why I go into contrast after and not during the global edits, right? And I'm going to go over that again here in a little bit, is because contrast affects color, contrast affects exposure. Exposure also affects color. Exposure also affects like everything, right? So if you try to do everything kind of all at the same time, it might become very confusing, right? You might not figure out what you need to change because you're kind of like jumping left and right, all over the place, hypothetically, right? So when you break them out in these bigger chunks of global edits, contrast is the second, and then I'm going to go into color, right? So those three are kind of like I think the major ways that you can think about editing that's going to really simplify the process for you, right? Just because like and once again, this is why I say this is just my process, my way of editing, because you could start with color first if you want, once you get more comfortable. And then after you do your color, then you can, go global edits, whatever it might be, right? This is where like, you're learning a good template for where to edit, and then you kind of just go from there, right? And then do what makes the most sense for you, right? So getting into it, share. Okay, so everybody can see, should be all good. All right, so this is light editing. I just did a preset. This is the raw photo. Actually, let's just, let me just reset this completely. All right, excuse me. So right here, guys, this is the raw photo, right? This is just what I'd look like when I took it in camera. I am using a Canon R6. It's my other photo body. It isn't my main one. If you look up here on the left, you can actually see like the name of the file, right? You can see my settings that I shot it at, and then you can also see the focal length that I shot it up here. So if anybody's ever curious about like what gear I'm using or like what I did to take this shot, honestly, just pay attention to this top left. And it'll kind of give you a rough idea of like what my settings were and what I did in that moment, right? Just in case you want to look at that. But first things first, right? So looking at this image, the first thing I think we can all agree looking at this image is that it's dark, right? It's underexposed, meaning there's just not really enough light into it. It looks like this is what it looked like it came out of camera. Now, if I just did my preset, right? Okay, that doesn't necessarily change anything, right? But you can see that there was a color and a contrast difference. So this is what I mean by, okay, yeah, you can apply your preset from photo to photo, and it might not look exactly right in the beginning, right? But then, and if you just apply your preset, this is a dark photo, all I have to do is just raise my exposure, and then now, like, you see how much more detail and information I'm just getting just from that, right? And then from here, after I've had applied my preset, then I'm going to kind of change and fix things. But that's essentially where I want you to get to, right? I want you to get to where you can just apply a preset, do something as simple as raise the exposure, or like I'm going to show you later, change the color temperature a little bit, and then it's going to ballpark your photo to where you want it to be. And then you spend another 10, 15 seconds editing real quick, and then boom, on to the next one, right? Like the speed and the efficiency of editing is going to make it a lot more fun for you. This is why, I'm going to say we're going to spend a few minutes on one photo because applying that preset, editing it to close to where you want to be, getting through all of this, you're going to be able to appreciate your work more. You're going to have a lot more fun. Because if you spend like 2 hours editing and you hate it, it's going to feel awful. Right? Actually, even editing for 2 hours is a long time. I wouldn't want you guys to edit for longer than an hour, hour and a half at a time because your eyes adjust to color, to brightness. So sometimes like you get too adjusted to things and you're not going to have a good edit anyway, right? So you need to take breaks. But that's a little bit more like, good tips and stuff. Okay. So we're going to start over from the beginning, guys. This is what the raw photo looked like, right? We're paying attention to the things that are in this photo that we want to fix. First things that stand out to me is the exposure. It's very dark. I can't really tell what's going on. I see this hand right here in the left. That's standing out there for me. That's, I believe, her other half. But when you're editing a photo, you really want to be able to see what it is you need to fix, right? So if you want to be able to see what you need to fix, the easiest place to start is always just raise the exposure. So for you guys in Lightroom Mobile, right now you're going to be under the Light tab. And if you scroll down, it should be one of the first sliders. One of the first sliders there, it's going to say exposure. I always start just by raising or dropping my exposure because like that alone is just going to reveal all the information that I need to see. You'd be surprised at how much more you can get from a photo that might seem underexposed. Even photos that are naturally overexposed. Let me see. Let me see what this look like. Did this, right? See if I take this down. You can still see information too, like a bit more information too for me taking the exposure down. So it works either way. It really depends on what your subject is, what the environment is, right? But the idea is show the information you want to fix first. Yeah. Okay, cool. So going back to this image, I just raised my exposure. I haven't changed anything else. The first thing I'm going to do from here, I'm actually going to crop first, right? Because I want to crop my images to make sure that the ones I'm working on, the frame is correct, that it just looks nice and it's something that I'm willing to accept, right? There are moments where you cannot fix everything about your photo. Hold on, wrong button. So there are times you're gonna have to say, okay, that's as close as I can get it. But you know, this is why we start with these things first to make sure that it's a photo that we like. So you see, when I'm cropping, right, I have the grid display. And this is why I say having the grid display is super helpful because I took this photo like this, right? And the photo like right now like this doesn't really feel balanced. It doesn't necessarily make sense, but it was just like the angle that I had to take it because of, the gentleman to my left, right? Sometimes you have to make these little slight turns to get your photo, and then you're going to have to fix it after. Because now with just a simple crop, and I'm doing a very straightforward like putting her in the middle, right? And I'm just going to twist it a little bit. And we're just going to kind of bring it right here in the center. Right. Boom. A lot more centered. Straightforward like that. Now I feel that this is a balanced photo. Now this is a photo that I'm going to work on. Right. If you go to a photo and you can't get it like, composed right or the way you want it to, maybe that's a photo you don't want to keep. Maybe that's one you want to move on from, right? And that's also a skill you're going to have to develop too, is recognizing when you have a photo that you're just, you can do everything you can to save it, but it's not worth your time, right? So framing, exposure, get that up first and make sure it's all good. And now we're just going to go down the line. I am going to skip contrast because that is going to be a different step, right? We're going to go ahead and let contrast go. But first things first, looking down at here, I'm paying attention to my bride. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I think the detail on her is nice for the most part. We do have a couple of kind of a little bit strong highlights here, there. They may or may not be taking your attention away from your subject. Actually, yeah, this area over here keeps pulling my attention. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the highlights down. I'm going to take it down until we see, oh, look at that. Now we got some nice information in there. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, guys, and I'm going to undo, right? So this is before I took the highlights down, and this is after. So what I'm doing here is I'm revealing information. And we can actually take that down a bit more. All right, now I can see what's in the grass. I don't feel like it's pulling everything, my attention away. Real quick side bit, guys. One thing when you're looking at your photos and you're trying to think about where your viewer is looking, the best test that you can do is what I call the eye test, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to look at your photo, you're going to look away, and then you're going to look back at your photo, and then pay attention to the first place that your eyes go to, right? Pay attention to where your eyes gravitate to initially, and then where you try to fight back to look at intentionally, right? Because for me, when I looked at this photo, so I'm going to share it again, my eyes were getting pulled to this bright spot right over here. Yeah. My eyes were getting pulled directly to there. So that's why for me, I was like, okay, we need to take the highlights down, right? This is what I mean by figuring out what it is that you need to change in your image and be purposeful about it, right? Okay, so the next thing we're gonna go to down here, we're gonna go to shadows. But actually, like, hold on. So going back a little back, now that I took the highlights down, this does feel a little bit more flat again. Okay, so that became a little more flat. Now I don't want it to be a bit brighter, but not too much. So push some more highlights back into her. Cool. I just raised my exposure again. So now you're gonna see you might just kind of have to backtrack a little bit during this phase, but that's okay. That's what you want. You want to kind of figure out what you need to fix. Right, now going back onto the next one, highlights, boosted the exposure back up a little bit, going into shadow detail. So looking at this image, right, we can kind of see everything, but I don't really see a lot of shadow detail going on here, right? I don't really notice, like, it doesn't feel very defined for me. So I might actually take this down a touch, right? And then if you can tell, right, now I'm getting a lot more black into like the different shadow portions of my image. Let's zoom in a little bit. I'm gonna go back. That's before and after, right? Before and then after. So you can kind of tell it put a little bit more contrast back into it too, right? And this is part of the reason why I'm doing contrast in a separate step is because, these things are going to change and affect my contrast, right? One thing I want to point out though before I continue, guys. So everybody sees this graph up here? Everybody can see it? So somebody I brought this up earlier, and I'm gonna tab out of this again real quick. I knew I was forgetting something. So in the top part, guys, in Lightroom Mobile, you should have this turned on. This is what's called your histogram, right? I'm going to tell you how to turn it on if you don't. That's okay. So on this other side, you see these three little dots, right? We're going to click those three little dots. And then on the third option down, you're going to see view options. View options, histogram. Make sure that thing's highlighted in blue. That should be the histogram. It should turn on for you after that moment. I'm going to go back to my screen. Why the histogram is important, right? A little bit of a history lesson that's not so important, but the histogram, this thing up here, this was originally developed by a guy named Ansel Adams and another famous film photographer back in the day to help photographers figure out how to get a correct exposure in their in their film photographs when they are printing them, right? Technically, this is a little bit more important for when you are printing your images, but this is a tool and a guideline that is going to help you so much with your photography because it tells you where your information is, right? Rather than having to guess where everything is, you just look at this graph. And this graph is going to tell you whether you have a sharp contrast, you have a soft contrast, right? Whether you have a lot of, like, all your information is in the highlights, in the shadows, etc., right? So how do we read the histogram? Well, it's read left to right. Super simple. And pay attention to the order because this order is going to come up again a little bit later, right? So starting from the left, right, we have our blacks, our black point, meaning that is the darkest point in our photo, right? So looking at this photo, if I just took blacks all the way down, right? So let me turn off my clipping. Okay, so that's me turning off black all the way, like just 100%. That's gross. Don't do that, right? This is before, this is after, right? So you can see it's affecting the darkest parts of my image. Now look at my graph here, right? As I take the blacks down, what's happening? Do you see it's like smashing against the wall and now we're getting a really sharp peak right against here in the left, right? What does that tell me? That tells me that I have a really sharp contrast in my blacks. Meaning if I was to zoom in to like these little dark areas, they're very, very dark, right? And it might not seem like it matters right now because it looks somewhat okay. But when I had this on, you see these blue highlights right here, right? I'm not having you guys turn this on because I don't want it to confuse you. And once again, something like this is more important for print because what this is called clipping. And clipping means that these areas are so dark that when you print this image, there is going to be no detail there but the color black, right? This is what I mean by like over editing, and this is why the histogram is a bit more important for print, because digitally you're not going to notice those imperfections as much, hypothetically, unless you do some sort of other over editing that, really kind of degrades your quality, right? So clipping is just kind of telling me that, okay, hey, you're going a little too hard in these areas and we need to lighten up. So you see as I lift the blacks, right, it kind of clears it up. So that means that when I print this photo now, there's going to be detail there, right? But as I've lifted this up, see the difference now, what the blacks look like? Rather than smashed against the wall and peaking super hard, now it softens out and it's kind of like going to a smooth, like kind of upward curve. So look here at this little top part right there. It's like a soft little like mountain, or right? Yeah, Mount Peaks and oh, sorry, it's a valley. That's what they call it. That's the correct term that they use. Because with the histogram, what you're looking for are what they call peaks and valleys, right? So if we have let's see if I can make my shadows, right? Let me just make the contrast. So you see when I just raise contrast, you see how it's pushing everything up, right? And you see how kind of like really intense and vibrant and contrasty my photo looks. So just by adding contrast, it's making all of everything peak, right? It's adding contrast in everything, which might be what you want, but I mean, this is just it's really kind of destroying the kind of quality that you're gonna have, right? So we don't want to do that hypothetically, right? But using the histogram, you're going to really pay attention to where you are peaking and where you have valleys, and that's also going to tell you when it comes to the contrast step where you might want to add contrast. Because for me, I don't do contrast in the global edits necessarily because I want to be very in control of my contrast because I don't want it to take over and supersede the entire image. Is there anything wrong with just using the regular contrast slider and adding a little bit of contrast that way? No, right? That is an easy way to do it. But, if you want to be more granular, if you want to be more specific with your detail, right? This is why we break it up into chunks. So with the histogram too, like the reason why I say this is just a guideline, it doesn't have to be everything, because depending on the image, right, and even if you edit it the same way, depending on how many highlights or how many dark points you have in your photo, it's going to look totally different because hypothetically you want it to touch the ceiling, right? You want it to have at some point, maybe be in the center or like anywhere up here, right? As long as it's not peaking in all corners, hypothetically. But if I go to something like this, right? I have so much bright sky that it's going to look like I don't have a lot of detail in my midtones, my shadows, or anything anyway. It's going to be spiking like this, right? But then watch as I crop out all that sky and do something like this. Now you see it's actually touching the ceiling, right? Because it has a lot more of the detail spread out into the shadows and then the midtones, and then I can work with that. So yeah, that might be a lot, guys. If you have questions about the histogram, I'm more than happy to explain it. This recording will be online after, so you guys will be able to reference it to go back over this in case there's anything that you need help with. Yesterday, because I was in a fluster, I didn't record the lecture like I was supposed to, but I have a bunch from other classes that I'm just going to share with you instead. So you're going to have it's all the same information, right? So you're going to have all that accessible, no problem. Okay. Getting back to the point. Okay, does anybody have any questions about the histogram? Anybody want me to revisit anything with that? Are we all
No,
pretty question?
no, all is fine.
Okay. All right, cool. I'm gonna get back to this. All right, so getting back to this photo. Histogram, hope it all makes sense, guys. I went to shadows, I took those down, trying to add a little bit more contrast. Yeah, a little bit more information on that black detail. Now it still feels very bright. So that's where we get to our whites, right? Our whites are on the right side here, right? This is going to be the brightest point of our photo, right? Our highlights are right before our whites. And then we have the midtones. Here it registers as exposure, but your midtones is like what you think of it as the information between your shadows and your highlights. Midtones, middle tones, right? So this is why, sorry, I forgot to finish this thought. It gets read from left to right. Blacks, shadows, midtones, it says exposure here, highlights, and details are in whites. So up here, right, it's saying most of my information is in my midtones, which is pretty good for what we want because it's a mostly even lighting scenario despite these like highlighted bits in between, right? So going to this part, we raise the blacks a little bit. Maybe we can take the whites down a little bit so it's not as bright, so it all kind of melds down a little bit together. Okay, I like that. And I might just raise the exposure a touch. Maybe take the shadows back down a little bit more because I want some more black. Actually, maybe take the black down a touch more. Cool. I like this. For the most part, that's pretty close to what I'd like for like the overall contrast and the general look, right? So pretty simple. We're just going from top to bottom. We did exposure, highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. All of this is going to be underneath in the light tab, right down here in the bottom, right? So we're in the editing one, and then it's going to be under light right here. Everything you guys should have found should have been right down here. So I'm bringing this up. The next thing we're going to look at is this thing right here where it says curve. So we're going to click on that and we're going to have this little graph pop up. Okay. So mine is going to look like this right here. I have a little small tab here on the side. I'm going to share my screen, guys. Okay. So here is the tone curve. So yours is going to have like something similar with these little four options right here. So this one on the left, it's a little bit of it's essentially a simplified version of the curve tool where you have some sliders that you can adjust and then it'll make those changes and you don't really have to kind of guess and make points, right? So this could be an easier option for you when it comes to adding contrast during this step. But typically I work within the regular just the regular curve tool option, right? You're going to see these three colors here on the side. You have red, green, and blue. So the reason that it's there is because this is how they used to color grade to a certain degree. But if you think about digital images, what we see on TV and our phones, everything, all the colors for TV, digital media in general, is comprised of the colors red, green, and blue. You may or may not have seen something that says sRGB. That's the color profile. That's pretty much like the color profile we see for everything on social media, YouTube, for the most part, right? So I'm not gonna go over the colors too much because you can see if you grab the line, you can add those the colors this way. But this is kind of a very difficult way to color grade. There's a much easier way to color grade. We have an actual color grading wheel, like color grading wheels now, which makes it super simple. And I have a way to teach you how to color grade that doesn't really even require you to know color theory. It's more of just like an intuition thing. So you can kind of just feel it out, right? So getting back to the point, going back up to contrast, we're gonna stay up here. So you saw when I grabbed the line when I was in the red color channel, I grabbed this line and then I just move it around. You can see the histogram move, everything's moving, right? Because essentially what I'm doing is I'm like, you can call it contrast, you can call it exposure, right? Is I'm adding or moving exposure into the different parts of my image. So with this though, when you want to use the curve tool, we don't want to affect the whole image because then we might as well just be using the contrast slider if that's the case. But what you're gonna do is you're gonna make points, right? If you click on the line once, it should make a point. If you double click the points, they should go away, right? I want you to make a point in the center and in the bottom left where like these lines intersect, and in the top right where these lines intersect. Okay. Now, if you look at this graph, does this graph look familiar? Somewhat, right? It's reminiscent of our histogram here on top. So if you're thinking about these points, it's read exactly like how the histogram is read. This point on the bottom is going to be our blacks. This point that we made here at this point area is our shadows. In the middle, we have our midtones. And in the top right, we have our highlights. And above that, very top right corner is our whites, right? Blacks, shadows, midtones, highlights, and whites. So, oh, okay, this is a good example, right? So you see, this is just me misclicking and touching the line. This isn't an edit that I would ever make. If it's something you like, totally up to you, whatever. But do you notice how because of the points, it's constricting the way that this is working, right? So instead of you punching or moving exposure into everything, these points are going to help you be more specific about where you put your contrast. So starting with this bottom left one, let's just grab that and take it down. And what you should notice, right? So look at my histogram. Let's go before. So right now, most like the good chunk of my details is right at that little verge point between my midtones and my shadows. And when I bring it down, I'm pushing exposure into my shadows. So now it's shifted over my detail from the midtones into the darker parts of my photo. So now I'm having my detail kind of peak at my shadow and black area. So you can see in this photo like that got like the darker areas got a bit more defined. Yeah. While these, they still have some like, still have some detail there, but all of the detail is not as focused into the brighter parts. It's more focused into like the darker parts and therefore giving it a bit more contrast. If you look here at the very tiny part, there's just like a little peak, just like a little tiny peak. So therefore I have a strong contrast. Now, what you also do is you can also grab the highlight area and then you can raise it up a bit because I did take the highlights down. You do want to have some like residual highlights to a certain degree if there is highlights in your photo. Because like if you were to take it down completely, like take the highlights down and then take, sorry, wrong one, and then take the whites down, like it's gonna be not as bright, but you're gonna, to me, it feels a bit over edited because I feel like the natural pop that you would get from these, like the highlights disappears. And I think if you've ever seen a photo that was like very bright and then just kind of they took the exposure too down too much, you can kind of tell that it was edited to try and fix that. Yeah. So I like my stuff to look as natural as I can, right? Keeping my editing to a minimum. Like even this, the contrast feels a bit too strong. So I would actually kind of tone some of that back. So let's kind of bring that up a little bit. But you see now it's a very subtle, slight movements that I did. So looking at this shape, this is what they actually call an S curve. This is what is referred to as probably the most like standard curve tool adjustment that you can make using the curve tool while editing. It gives a very simple, natural, but like even contrast throughout your photo for the most part. I say S curve, it's like the hint of an S, right? It's not an actual S, because if it was an actual S, then it wouldn't even actually get to look like, and this just looks awful. I think we can all agree that this just looks bad. But that's why we make these points, and that's why it's all very subtle, because those little movements are going to go a long way. So the S curve is like the most standard way of doing, using the curve tool adjustment. I think that's a good safe place for a lot of you guys to start, but one thing that I want to point out, so let's actually reset my lines. So I'm just gonna put them all back. Sorry. Just double click on everything and then I'm always gonna make points when I'm using this. I always make points in the same spot because that way it kind of constrains the movement. So for you guys, is it in YouTube? Hold on. Do I not have it? No, Lightroom doesn't have it. No, okay. I was gonna show you and this is another reason why I like using like my PC because like for my PC, if you're using it on like the computer program, this one actually has a little target to where you can click on the part of your photo that you want, and then you can make the curve tool adjustment there, right? That's why like I think editing on a computer is a bit just a lot more convenient in that sense, but unfortunately it doesn't have it. That's not something you absolutely need though. I'm going to go back to a different way of showing you how to use this. So instead of using this automatic little point, which is convenient if you have a computer, right? Instead of grabbing these actual points, you want to grab in between. So you're getting even more granular with it, right? So instead of just doing the standard curve tool, I'm going to go between the shadows and the blacks and try to do it that way. Because for me, what I like is just a little bit more. Yeah, I think right around there. Okay, it does feel a little sharp. Maybe I just kind of raise the midtones, take them down. right? You see, I'm just kind of playing with this, guys. That's just that this is what I mean by like there's a bit more intuition with editing too, right? Like I can only teach you how to edit like things that I the way that I would edit, but how you might go through this process of moving the curve tool, it might be totally different, right? Pay attention to what speaks to you, to what stands out, and then ultimately too, pay attention to what you need to fix. Because there is a point where you can use the curve tool and you see now we're getting like I like the contrast I'm getting here, but these areas feel like a bit too like punchy. Like that especially doesn't really feel too good to me. So maybe I might go back to, my global edits, and then I might take the whites down just a touch to kind of blend that back in. Maybe we do the highlights too. So there is a bit of a dance with editing where you're kind of just going back and forth, but it's to me it's a lot nicer and easier where okay, hey, I'm on the curve tool. Oh, I see I have a highlight issue. Now I can scroll back up and go to my highlights and fix that and then go back to what I was doing, instead of just being like, okay, I made this curve tool adjustment. Okay, it still doesn't look right. Okay, maybe if I just kind of drop this, okay, now that's off, right? Oh, if I wanted to fix the highlights, we drop this down. Oh, but that looks weird. Oh no. You see what I mean? Like it can feel really daunting, but this is why you break it up into different steps so that when you need to go back and fix, it's easy. And you know what you want to look for. Ideally, you know what you want to look for, right? Okay, so that's the curve tool. That's how I do contrast for the most part. It is going to take time. That it's going to take, just repetition of you guys like doing it. But there's so many ways to do contrast, right? This is one way of adding to it. You can definitely use the contrast slider to fill in a bit more if you need to. Honestly, what I like to do is I'll do the curve tool adjustment first. And then if I feel like my contrast is still a bit too high overall, but I think most of it looks good, I will actually use the contrast slider to balance it out and just take some contrast down instead. I use that to balance that overall just because that is like a little bit of an easier way for doing it for me too. So something that you can try to apply when you're getting to that point. Okay, that's contrast. Does anybody have any questions about contrast? Anything we just did? Thumbs up if we're all good. Yep. Sweet. Okay, awesome, guys. I'm gonna go on to the next part. Okay, so we went through global edits, we went through framing real quick, we went through contrast using the curve tool. The next thing we're gonna go through, guys, is color. To me, I think color is probably the most fun part of editing, but it can also be the most challenging and the most frustrating part of editing too, depending on your comfortability with it. Because I think figuring out contrast and everything is easy for the most part for me, but to get colors to work together, to blend, to not be, to work, yeah, took a kind of a while because there are so many different ways to control color. And I think you just have to kind of pay attention to where you're starting from once again. And that way you can figure out what it is you need to really fix and be more intentional because there's something called the color mix tool that allows you to control each individual color. This is where I think color control is super important and is very helpful because I'm going to show you saturation and vibrance first. They will add color. They will take away color away, right? Depending on how you use it. But once again, they're global edits. They're affecting everything. They're affecting all of the colors in your image, and that might not necessarily be what you want. So going into vibrance and saturation, right? They're right next to each other here. Oh, the next part that we are at, guys, just to show for reference, we are in color. So underneath here, right over, you're going to click color, and you're going to see the first thing is going to be color temperature, right? You have vibrance and saturation. And then above it, it says color mix and then grading. That's what we're going to go into after, okay? And that's going to be the next steps. Back to the screen. Okay, so going back to color. Now, okay, did my contrast, curves tool adjustment, did all that. Looking at this image, now I am going to, first thing, I'm actually going to start with my color temperature. Now, you could start with your color temperature first while editing. That's not a bad way to do it. That's how I used to do it too. I think for you guys, it's not a bad thing to start with necessarily. But looking at the slider here, you see where it's blue on the left, yellow on the right, right? So the easiest way to think about color temperature If it goes down, if it's cool, it's blue, right? That means it's cold. It's a cooler color temperature. When you cool down your color temperature, you're going to get a lot more vibrant blues, purples, like magentas to a certain degree, right? And then as you raise it, it's going to get warmer. And when you get warmer, colors like orange, yellow, greens really start to pop out more and become very vibrant, right? And they just become warm. So when you're thinking about color temperature, it's going to be kind of one or the other. Now, if you see mine, you see that I have like actual numbers here. The reason being that I have this and you might not is because I'm editing a raw photo, and chances are you guys are going to be editing JPEGs. When you edit a JPEG, right, you can't change the color temperature hypothetically like the way that you would in a editing a raw photo. What you're going to get instead is going to be plus or minus. It's going to start from like +0, and you just if you raise it 1, 2, or 3, it's going to get warmer. If you do it -1, 2, or 3, it's going to get cooler. So that's why if you're looking at mine wondering why it's different, that's all that is. It's just because you're editing on a JPEG, I'm editing on a raw photo, right? So let me put this back to as shot. So if you see where it says this WB, guys, that translates to white balance. There should be, when you're editing, there's going to be a little tab where you can click. There is a couple of options that you can go through. I don't think it's a bad idea for you guys to play around with like seeing what auto would do, right? Daylight, cloudy, shade. The only thing that I, would have you guys probably not worry about as much is tungsten and fluorescent. Those are like, artificial lights. So like when you're indoors, when you're at a club or whatever. If you're doing stuff in that lighting environment, yeah, try to choose one of those and see what the light is. But why I have you click on those is because you can see here it changes what the auto settings are for that. So that's kind of a good way to introduce you to what the to see how that color temperature works within those different lighting environments, right? Because let's go to as shot. So my original photo, this was auto white balance, right? It was in the shade. So my camera registered is like, okay, we're in the shade. There's a few like I'm metering on her. Okay, it's a little bit cooler, so we're just gonna kind of go more a little bit of a softer, like cooler color temperature, right? If you look at her dress, it's still it is white. There is a blue tinge to it though. Do you guys notice like the blue tinge that's on top of it, right? Those are things we want to look out for, and those are things that we are going to correct, right? But going back to color temperature, first things first, looking at this, yes, to me it is a bit cool. So I am going to go ahead and raise the color temperature. Now, hold on, let me zoom in on our dress so I can show you with what I mean by we're going to correct that, right? So this is the color temperature. This is the auto white balance, what it was shot in, right? As I raise the color temperature, it's going to make the photo warmer. Do you notice the blue starting to fade away? Do you see how now it's still white? We get a little bit of color in there, but it's not as like that cool blue as was before, right? But now we look at her skin tone. There is some color stuff that I'm gonna do to kind of bring more of her skin tone back, right? But this is what it was before, right? And then as we raise the color temperature, you can see it's really like desaturated on her arms right there. So as we raise the color temperature, look at her skin tone come back a bit, right? So you can still see it's desaturated on this part of her arm, and the reason being for that is because like this part of her is in light and this part of her is in shade. If I was using a flash to fill in the light to hit her body, then we would get a much more even like color and lighting exposure on her body. But this is part of working outdoors, and these are things that we look for to correct, and we can kind of basically cheat it using color, right? Getting back to the point, so here I raise the color temperature a little bit, but can you see that there's a little bit of like a pink tinge to her, like a little bit of a magenta, right? So if you look at this tab underneath that says tint, so to the left is green, to the right is magenta or pink. Now, if I just made this 0, if I just made this 0, this is what let's go to auto. So as shot, and then if I take this away, 0, do you see how much more green my photo is now? Right? So reason being, all light, no matter what kind of light it is going to have a color cast of some sort, meaning that the light is going to lean either a little bit green or lean a little bit magenta. Now, especially for this, right? And the reason why this is leaning green, what is she surrounded by? Green, a lot of like forest and vegetation. So because the sun is coming through all of this green vegetation, we're getting a more green heavy light hypothetically on our subject and on our area. So my camera sees that, and during auto white balance, it said it wanted a cooler white balance at about like 5050, and then it added about 25 points of magenta, right? So I did that kind of fast, but let me zoom in, right? So this is her skin tone without it. But pay attention to as I milk in a little bit of magenta. Do you see a little bit more of that rosiness kind of coming back to her skin? I mean, she's still she kind of looks like she's dead. Excuse me. Let's raise the color temperature up to bring more of that skin tone back. I hope she never sees this. Yeah, but you see, like with the color temperature, right? Just doing that alone is I'm bringing more color, more everything back into the image just by that alone. That's why I think this is a great place to start because you kind of, once you get it to the overall color temperature to where you want it to be, then we're going to correct all the little individual colors, right? So it's our global edit once again, and then we're going into the more granular edits. So looking at this, okay, give me a second. Let me see how I want this to look. Let's spread it a bit more. Yeah. Oh, edit. Roughly, give or take. I'm going to fix some things from right there. Okay, so now this is my color temperature that I set from there. Awesome. Wonderful. I'm going to go down to vibrance and saturation now. So vibrance, saturation, should we get in? Oh. Oh, I'm sorry. I totally missed your message. I'm sorry about that, Val. Okay, getting back to this, guys. Vibrance and saturation. So they both affect the whole image, right? I think we're all familiar with saturation for the most part, but saturation is increasing the intensity of all colors, every single color out there, the entire color wheel. Now, we had a very desaturated, kind of lighting environment to begin with. So we can kind of punch the saturation quite a bit to make it look a bit more natural. But now you see her skin tone. Now it looks a lot more like healthy, right? She looks a lot more like kind of alive. But like pay attention to everything though. So yeah, her skin tone is going to start to come out more with the more saturation that we add, which is nice. But now I'm starting to get what for me, which is an uncomfortable amount of green and yellow and red, right? So you see over here all these colors. Yeah, we were able to add the color back to her. That blue tinge in her dress is a lot stronger now. But now you have all the other colors a little bit too saturated for me, right? So saturation is going to affect every color, every single color. The other option is vibrance. Now, vibrance does affect color, but vibrance affects the colors in your image that are predominantly there. Meaning, instead of affecting all the colors in the color wheel, as we raise this, it's going to work a lot more subtly, a lot more nicely, in my opinion. And it's a softer but gradual addition of color that doesn't feel so like overt or that doesn't feel so much, right? Because this is at what, 50? Okay. This is 50 vibrance. I like this. There are still some things that I'm going to want to correct and fix with the color mix tool. But this feels a lot more reasonable than this, right? I mean, yeah, because this I feel like there's going to be a lot more that I have to fix. And once again, this is where preferences come in. Yeah. Okay. So, honestly, a good, easy way, if you wanted to keep things simple and kind of fast, depending on what you're editing, what I'll do, like, well, this is a pretty desaturated photo. Let me find one. Okay, like this one. Okay. Oh, actually, I'll show you right here. So looking down at this photo, right, this is obviously edited for the most part, just when I just have my preset on it. But if you look down here, I added vibrance and then I took saturation down. Without either of those, this is what the photo looks like. This is still not bad, actually. This is nice. I like this. This is more my contract work. So this company likes a bit more color. So for them, I'll take the saturation down, and then I just pump a bit more of that vibrance in. So we have that nice blue come back, but it's not like overly what I would just not overly saturated, right? Does that make sense, guys? Any questions on that? Thumbs up. Yeah, cool. I'm gonna go back to my photo, wherever it is. Where did I put that photo? It's after here. There we go. Okay, getting back to this photo. All right. What do I want to do here? I don't want to. Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, so I just added a bit more vibrance, and then I just took down the saturation a touch, adding a bit more color to everything, but there's still a bit more that I want to control with color. So that being said, we did vibrant saturation, we did color temperature. I have to scroll down to get to color mixer, guys, but color mixer is going to be, if you just look above color temperature inside Lightroom Mobile, it's going to be on top left or to the left and middle of that. We're going to go in the color mixer tool, and you're going to see these three options. You're going to see hue, saturation, and luminance, and you're going to get all the different colors of the color wheel, right? So the thing to know about color before I go into these options is that color has every color has a complementary color, and then every color also has an opposing color. That is like the easiest and most straightforward way I can talk about color theory, because color theory in itself would be a whole week of classes, just on that. Because color theory can get very complicated. If you guys ever, has anybody ever seen the show Queen's Gambit, like on Netflix? Has anybody? If you haven't, please watch it. Please watch it and pay attention to the color that they use in that show. That show is a phenomenal example of color theory, because the way that what the people wear, the background and everything, that is great color theory. Now, all of us are regular people. We don't have that kind of budget for the shoots that we're going to be doing. I definitely know, right? So what we have instead is the color mixer tool. And if you look at it, we have every single color listed, right? So when it comes to the complementary color, if you're trying to think about what is red's complementary color, it's orange, and orange is right next to it, right? What is yellow's complementary color? Green, aqua, blue, purple, magenta. So rather than having to guess, it's right next to each other. It's like the one typically right underneath it, So if you're trying to adjust one color, but you're not having any luck or having the kind of effect that you're looking for, try to edit the complementary color, because the complementary color might be the one that you're actually looking for. You might be surprised. Like even in this photo, for example, right? So this is something that a lot of people, you don't really figure out until you start editing. But the idea is that most people think that the predominant color here would actually be the color green. The predominant color here actually is the color yellow. A lot of what we think registers as the color green is actually yellow. So see, if I took away all the yellow saturation there, right? All that is still there. We still get green, but I think that we have a lot less green than we might have thought from just taking away the yellow. Now, if I leave yellow and I take away green, look at how much color is still there, right? So this is why paying attention, knowing the complementary colors is going to be super helpful, because that might be the one that you need to change. So going on to these three separate tabs right here, we have hue, saturation, and luminance. Now, hue, if you think about like color shades, like pink is a shade of red, right? Indigo is a shade of blue. Blurple is a shade of purple and blue, right? Like if you change the hue of something, you're changing its color shade. So watch me change the green, right? So I can make the green more yellow, hypothetically, or I can take the green and make it more like actually green. I can make the yellow more orange, or I can make the yellow more green. And now it's like actually green. Would I ever do this? No, this looks awful, right? But that's what hue is. You're just changing the shade of the color. So guys, when it comes to hue, I don't like to work with it as much, because I like to have a good baseline for all of my colors and what I'm doing. I think I personally would rather figure out my color temperature first and then do some of these other color stuff and then finish off with color grading. Because when you start changing the color hue and then you start editing the other colors, you're essentially changing, like, okay, yellow isn't registered as yellow anymore. It's registered as kind of like an orange. And then when you're trying to change a different color, right? And it already, if this sounds complicated, what I'm trying to say, it can be that complicated when you're trying to fix those colors doing hue. I'm not saying don't use it. I'm saying super granular, super little changes. Don't go too heavy with it, right? Just because it can become a lot and take away and just kind of make your photo look a little funky if your colors aren't cohesive. Yeah. Going on to saturation. Now, I know we already talked about saturation just a moment ago. Saturation is the intensity of the color. Either we have a lot of saturation or we have no saturation, right? One of the two. We kind of mix it in between. That's why I think this part of the color mix tool is probably where you're going to be doing most of your work in when it comes to color, because color, right, this is why I'm talking about balancing all the different other parts of color that I see within this photo. And you see, I'm just kind of just messing around with some of this right now, kind of balancing things, right? But this is where I think it just gets a lot more fun because if you just took the photo, or yeah, if you just use the photo out of the camera, right, with auto settings, auto white balance, and said, hey, this is my work, well, people might not appreciate your work as much because it's going to look very standard. It's going to look right out of the camera, right? But color, this is where you can really individualize and make your photos speak who you are, right? Because color aesthetics, right? The amount of color, the lack of color, like I was saying before, all that stuff, that's going to be representative of your style and how you like to portray your images, right? So for me, I like a little bit more on the desaturated side. I talked to this couple, they like a little bit more on that desaturated side too. So I might live with this. I kind of like the way that this looks for the most part. Right. Actually, because this is my Canon, and this is where I say once again it's granular, I'm actually gonna make those a bit more. Is it that or that? See, now I actually do want to make the green a bit more greeny here because I don't like that yellow. The yellow is kind of gross to me. So let's actually go back and let's take some of that green down. Kind of bounce that out a bit more. Or is it yellow? Cool, like that. It's in the shade, guys. Like, I mean, this is the lighting environment for what it is. I'm not going to try to make it like look anything other than what it was. So I think I'd live here. I like this. Okay, for the most part. I think this is close to where I want for my color to be for using saturation, right? The last one we're going to go over is luminance. So if you think about the word luminance, right? Think about the word lumen. Lumen represents light, right? So luminance is how bright or how dark your colors are within your image. Now, going back to those yellow and the green. So this photo is more, it's in the shade, right? So it doesn't really have a lot of highlight pop per se. So let's say we want her to stand out a little bit more. Let's say I want her skin tone to kind of come back and really be a little bit more noticeable. So skin tones, for reference, is going to register typically as red, orange, or yellow, depending on the person's skin tone. So for her, let's actually raise the orange. Let's see. Right? Okay, yeah. So let me zoom in there. Let me get even closer. Okay, let's put that back to 0. Okay, so watch her skin tone as I raise the orange. You should notice it getting a lot brighter. That's 25. So before, after. So this is kind of a nice way too, if you're in a more flat lighting environment, to bring more attention to a specific color or something about your subject, right? Is if everything else is a little bit more flat, but you raise the luminance on the color of like their skin tone or the color of like your subject, whatever it might be, then you're going to hypothetically bring more attention to that subject. Because the way your eyes work when you're paying attention to photos typically is you're either going to look at the brightest part of your subject of your image or the darkest, right? Depending on how it's shot. So these are little things, little tricks that you can kind of include in your image to make sure that your viewer is looking at the things that you want to. And that's just adding a little bit of luminance to the colors that you want to kind of stand out. And then it's the same for the flip side, right? You can either, once again, you can let's raise the green, see the green get a little bit brighter so we can kind of have that stand out a little bit more. Maybe what if I want the yellow to kind of be a bit more subdued? That's probably not what I want. But see, now if I can just take the luminance away from that, we're having less attention. And once again, this is a bit, I wouldn't actually do this, right? It's paying less attention to those brighter parts that are standing out. And we're focusing more on what it is that we want to focus on more, which is our subject. Where I would actually put it is maybe right about, yeah, we'll do something like that. This looks like it got a little flat. Let's see a little more vibrance. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, cool. All right, so that's hue, saturation, and luminance, right? So looking at her dress, so before we had that blue tinge to her dress, right? I kind of skipped over this. I'm gonna put all the blue back that I took away, and you see all that blue come back into her dress, right? So once again, light has a color cast, and because her dress is partially in the shade, it's gonna register as a bit cooler naturally versus the part of her that's in the light. So for me, the blue is a bit strong, same with the purple. So this is why I just took the blue saturation down, down, down. Actually, let's take it to right about there. I wouldn't want to take it completely away because then it does feel a bit unnatural, right? Because there is a bit of blue that was kind of casting on her skin. So now I'm really taking away skin tone from her, but just taking a little bit will help tremendously, right? Cool. Okay, yeah, I like the way this has turned out a lot more. So that's hue, saturation, and luminance. Okay. Anybody have any questions about that? Need help or anything? So guys, if that seems challenging, that's okay. There is something that's going to make your life a lot easier. This is what I was trying to show you with the curve tool, but you can actually do it in the color mix tool. So in the middle on the top, you see that crosshair, right? You're going to click that crosshair. And underneath, you see where it says hue, saturation, or luminance, right? So the beautiful thing about this is rather than guessing what color is what, you're going to tap on the screen and you see where I'm tapped. It's going to say saturation blue, and you can use your finger to either drop it or raise it, right? So you're just tapping on the specific parts of your screen, and you're instead of guessing, right? The app is basically going to tell you for you like what it is you're changing, right? And this works, and you got to make sure you're selected on which one you want to be changing. So right now I'm just on saturation, but this is a wonderfully fast and easy way, and also kind of fun, right? I think way of editing your color in the color mix tool. That's just going to make it so much faster for you and just make it so much easier. Because once again, color is going to take a lot of time to pick up, maybe for some of us, right? But super easy. You just got to give yourself time, use that tool to make it easier for you. And you might be surprised at how much your photos are going to change and develop just by using something as simple as the color mix tool. Okay, going back to this. Okay, so we did the color mix tool, guys, going just starting from the beginning, right? We did our global edits, right? We did our framing with a crop. We did our curve tool for contrast, right? And now we're doing color mix, right? So we started from, hold on, oops. We started from here, and now our photo is here, right? Before, after, and like a lot of the times I've noticed my students, they take a photo like this, even especially if they're using like a DSLR and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't do anything with this photo. Totally wrong. Absolutely not true. Like you'd be surprised at what it is that you can do with your images with just a little bit of editing, right? So we did color mix. We're going to go into color grading. I got to speed this up. We only have about 20 minutes left. So guys, color grading, I wouldn't say color grading is absolutely necessary for all of you. Color grading, once again, just like anything, it can get very complicated and, very confusing really fast. But there is a simple way to do it that I found that I think works really well. And all you have to remember are the words spin to win. That is probably the easiest way that I can teach you color grading that might stick, is the words spin to win, right? So we look at our three wheels that we have. So when you open it up inside Lightroom Mobile, right? So it's right next to the color mix tab. You're going to click it, and you're going to get the first circle that comes up is going to be shadows. The next one is going to be midtones, and then the last one is going to be highlights. So when you are doing color grading, shadows first, highlights second, midtones third. So instead of this is the one thing that's not in order, okay? Highlights first, shadows second, or excuse me, shadows first, highlights second, and then midtones. Okay? That is the order that I want you to stick with it for the most part. Just because I feel like, especially doing shadows or highlights, you could kind of go either or. Highlights first, shadows first. Either of those first could be fine. Just don't do midtones middle. Midtones need to be last. Because the reason being is because shadows and highlights are going to have the most dramatic and noticeable effect. Whereas midtones, that's more supplemental, I think, to balance out what I typically use it is for like skin tones, right? So how we do it, so there's there's three circles hypothetically. There's a circle of the color wheel, right? There's one circle in the middle, and then there's one circle on the outside, right? So remember that I'd said that colors have complementary colors and they also have opposing colors. So the way that you can learn opposing colors is actually by using this wheel, because the opposing color is on the opposite side of the color wheel from each other. So remember, when we're looking at color temperature, you have you have magenta and green. Looking at the color wheel down here, this is green. What is directly across from green? Magenta. What is directly across from blue? Yellow, right? aqua, red. So you see that's how if you needed to figure out opposing colors, and why I bring that up is because color grading is my last finishing color touch to make my photos look what I feel like is supernatural. Well, make them look natural, not supernatural, excuse me. And the reason being is because all the color casts from different things, you see that because of the light, her skin tone isn't exactly perfect. We got this really desaturated part of her arm right there that to me stands out and isn't exactly the most flattering because it looks like she's kind of a bit on the paler side, right? Which I think she was, but we can give her a little bit of a Hawaii tan for fun, you know? So going into color grading, what you're going to do is you're going to grab from this middle circle first. And once again, this is subtle, subtle. We're not going far because if you go all the way to the opposite end, you're essentially adding 100% of whatever color this outside wheel is at. Color grading, it's a supplemental thing for the most part. So we only want a little bit. Let's go somewhere around there, right? Just a little bit after, right? And you should notice that introduction of color right after you do it. And this is where the phrase spin to win comes in. I like my sayings, guys. They're kind of cheesy, but they really help me remember certain concepts. So when you grab this outside wheel, we're just spinning it around. We're spinning it around to try and see what color in the shadows to me looks the most flattering. I am actually going to gravitate to somewhere right around here. I like this. Yeah, I like the blue. And this is kind of where I always tend to gravitate, right? Because I know for me, getting rid of that yellow, I'm always going to end up gravitating towards a little bit of blue to kind of balance it out. But let's kind of, okay, let's reset that. Where is it? Which button is it? Option. Okay, so this is before, after. Before, after. And it's subtle, right? If you have a hard time seeing it, that's fine, right? So I did the shadows first. I like that blue that I kind of introduced there. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to grab it a little bit out. Now we're going to spin it around the wheel. Spin it around the wheel. Okay, here we go. I'm liking that. Okay, cool. So now we got a nice balance of adding in some of the yellow back. I'm going to have to add midtones after. Something like that. Okay, cool. I like the way that's looking. So we added blue into the shadows. We got a little bit of like yellowish orange, orangish yellow, however you want to describe it, into the highlights, right? Making it a little bit warmer, which is kind of what I want anyway, because this was shot in the shade. That way the colors come out a bit more that I kind of tweaked. And now we're going to go into midtones because I feel like it actually needs midtones. But do a little bit after, or a little bit from there, maybe a little bit less. Right, I don't like pink, and now we're just gonna spin the wheel. And with skin tones, I typically kind of go between orange and yellow, but it depends on the photo. Because I like to add that back into, sorry, my dog. Some of that color back into her skin tone. Yeah, see, because now you're looking at her arm, right? So let's reset this. For me, this is a bit too desaturated, but with just a little bit of color grading that I add, and it's not perfect, of course, right? But now I feel like this is a nice warmer image. Okay, I'm gonna go back to my coloring temperature. It might be a little too warm. Take that down just a touch, and cool. Yeah, I think that's roughly where I'd have this image, give or take. So we started from here, and now we are here. All right, once again, this is the raw image out of the camera, the way it was shot. And this is what I am finishing with this editing, right? So we started with our global edits. Sorry, wrong one. We framed it using the crop tool, make sure everything was the way I want it to be. Global edits, right? Then we went into our contrast using the curve tool. After we did our contrast, we did our color corrections. We edited with color, right? We did color mix using the hue, saturation, and luminance. And then we finish it off using color grading. And then I got my image to look just roughly just how it looks right now. So that to me, guys, is the more, I would say probably a more standard way that you could go through through editing, right? Color grading is an extra step. It isn't necessary. I consider that to be an advanced editing technique because color grading, once again, can get very complicated. So it's not something I'm expecting you to do per photo. But if you want to challenge yourself and see what it is you can come up with, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Like, people like I've had people tell me it's like, "Oh, how do I add mood into my photo? How do I add a vibe?" Depending. Color is a good way to do that. It is better if you think about that beforehand and plan it into the shoot. I think that like anything you can do while you're taking the photo beforehand is always going to be better than having to do it after, 100% of the time, right? But if you kind of have a vision in mind and you know that's where you're going to go anyway, then yeah, that's where color comes in. That's where you get to really just kind of individualize and make your photo truly yours. Because otherwise, it's just going to be, a photo, just another phone, or it's another photo in your phone. And how many photos do we have in our phone right now that we love, hypothetically, that we just don't do anything with, right? Because it's probably just very standard, or we haven't done anything to it to make it look interesting to us, you know? Okay, so that is color, that's editing for the most part, guys. There are a few other things I'm going to go over really quickly. These are all kind of like just like extra little like personality things or aesthetic things you can add in terms of editing. So where we're going to go at to next, looking at the color or Lightroom Mobile. Hold on, let me stop. So the next thing, guys, I'm going to go over in Lightroom Mobile, right, is we're going to go over, hold on, there it is. We're going to go over effects, details, and optics. I am not going to go over blur. I am not going to go over masking. Reason being, guys, those are paid features for Lightroom Mobile. I told you I don't want you to have to pay anything if you don't want to. And honestly, like the lens blur thing, that's kind of like adding a portrait mode look to your photos. And, if that's something you want to do, that's totally up to you. I just don't think it looks very good personally. So, but try it. And if you want it, totally up to you. Chats, do you think it's necessary for our portfolio to have a color style in our photos? I think if that's something that you decide to do, I think that'd be awesome, right? I think that that would be great. I think that having a cohesive theme or a consistent theme is a great idea because it will, one, I think, challenge you creatively because you have to constrain your, thoughts on what you're shooting a bit more. But it's like that's the thing about the final portfolio is it's really up to you guys, right? It's really how you guys want to like to portray it. Hold on, let me see if I can pull up my last class's gallery real quick and show you guys. So just to kind of show you what some people have done. So guys, this is what I make. You guys can see the gallery, right? Am I showing this right? Okay, yeah. So I use my cloud service to host to give you a really nice gallery for the class. I just use your first names, right? But it'll look something like this, right? So really the work that you want to put in this class is the work you're gonna get. This is the panning thing that I was talking about. Like if you move with people with something that's moving, you can get some really cool shots, right? Or burst mode. If you do burst mode, that could work for something like this too, right? But yeah, this is what it's going to look like. This is how it's going to really show. And this is why, I'm saying like the work that you put into it, guys, is the work that you're going to get out of it. Because like this is a really high-end portfolio gallery that I use for my regular clients. I'm not saying that to impress you. What I'm saying is that the quality of like how your JPEGs and everything look in the end just look phenomenal. Right? And that's why I like this because you really get to show the work that you did. And you want to be able to appreciate your work, right? You want to be able to celebrate your work. And a part of getting better in photography is you have to show your work, right? So that's what the gallery is for. So just keep that in mind, guys. If you have an idea what you want to do with it, with your final portfolio, run with it, right? As long as it's reasonable and school appropriate. That's the only thing that I ask. Other than that, have fun, be creative. Like just go outside the box if you want to, or keep it straightforward. It's entirely up to you. Okay, sorry, I was getting away from the point. First things first, we're gonna go over was it details? Is that the next one? Yeah, we're gonna go into effects. So effects for me are actually gonna be down here where it says presence. So in effects, the first thing you're gonna see, so when you click it, make sure you also click the other one that says effects. You should see texture, clarity, and dehaze. Now, texture is just like it sounds. You guys know what texture is, right? It's how something looks and feels, right? So I can either take away texture or I can add texture, right? I think adding texture could be nice for something like landscapes, wildlife, things that you might want to have a little bit more vivid reality to it. People, not so much, especially my ladies. My ladies, like, Do you think you want to add a bunch of texture to your face, like, and overly sharpen your features? Probably not, right? Guys, like we could actually stand to benefit from that because, a little bit of ruggedness might actually make us look a little bit more masculine, a little bit more rugged, which is, good for us necessarily, but it might not be what you want for yourself, right? So, this is just me pointing out that depending on your subject matter and what you're editing, you really want to pay attention to what you're using, right? So just a good rule of thumb when I'm editing portraits of people, I do a negative texture just to soften up the skin a little bit. It's just super simple, little cheat way to do it. The next one, guys, is going to be clarity. So clarity and contrast are similar in the sense that they add definition into your image, but contrast is adding definition into the bright and dark parts of your image. Clarity is adding definition into the lines within your image. So let's go before. So this is what it looks like without clarity. And then watch as I start adding clarity. Can you feel like everything gets really defined and really sharp, right? So if you've ever seen like a drama filter where someone does like a picture of a building and it's really sharp and gray and very overly defined, they just took the clarity slider and just went to 100 and just was like drama, sweet. This looks awful. You don't necessarily want to do this, right? So unless you want to, whatever, just make it look good. With clarity, guys, even if I'm working with people, I will actually add maybe just 10 clarity, just to kind of sharpen the lines a little bit more. I like a softer contrast, but I still want things to stand out. So that's why I just add a touch of clarity. If you're doing like wildlife, landscapes, whatever the like, you might even want to add a bit more clarity because it's going to kind of make it stand out a little bit more, especially if you kind of want a little bit more of a visceral or almost 3D look to your images. Right? That's clarity. So the next one over from that is going to be vignette. Now, guys, I consider vignetting an advanced editing technique. That's kind of a loose association, just being honest with myself. But part of the reason why is, or is it? Hold on. It's effects. That's a different one for me. So vignetting, guys, if you've ever, has anybody ever seen like the J.C. Penney portraits? Where it's like mom, dad, and like, whatever, they're just really smiley. And they might have like this dark or very bright kind of framing like this. So this is what's called vignetting. And this bright and this dark of a vignette is very uber traditional. I personally don't care for it. It's a little too much. It's not like, yeah, do what you want with it. My point is, so I think a little bit of a dark vignette, especially when you're shooting outdoors, is a little bit of a secret sauce to make sure that people are paying attention to your subject. And the reason why I say that is because so if we pay attention to this photo, you see that it's just bright all over it, right? So if I just take the vignetting down just a little bit, right there, what's happening is we are still darkening the frame of our photo. And what you might not realize is subconsciously you are pushing your viewer's eye towards the center and they're also brighter part of your image, which for me is my subject, right? I raised the orange luminance on her skin tone so she pops a bit more. And now with that negative vignette, it's going to emphasize her even more so, right? Try to make it subtle. Really shouldn't be able to see it. Like I think even this to me is a bit much because I can kind of tell that it was a vignette, right? So something like a little bit softer, -10, -15, -5, right? Depending on your photo. So that's something you can play around with that. The next one is going to be grain. So guys, there's a difference between film grain and digital noise. Digital noise is an imperfection in your photos, right? From like shooting and not having enough light. Film grain is a digital effect you can add to your images to give it more of like that tactile, old school filmy feel that people tend to really love because it feels more authentic and genuine. Now with grain, when you add it, right, if you go to like 100 or go to like 50, you can see it from when you're zoomed out. But if you're going to add grain, please zoom in because you're not going to be able to tell as much. And you might be overkilling it depending on what you want if you're not zoomed in. Because as you add grain, you don't really start to see it until, okay, right about there. But if I zoom out, I can't really tell that there's any grain in this photo, right? If you want the heavily grain look, yeah, punch it, do what you want, right? But why I think people like to add a little bit of film grain to their images is because it softens the features a bit more. right? A lot of the newer cameras, they're like high definition. My main camera, my Sony A7R5, it's like 60 megapixels. It's kind of ridiculous. So it looks like almost too real. So when you add a little bit of grain, it kind of flattens the image a little bit and makes it look more like a traditional photo, right? So if you like that vintage film style, that's one way you're going to add it right there, right? Okay, so film. Okay, going into detail, guys, that's going to be the next one. That is the next tab over from effects. The first thing I'm going to look at, guys, and the first thing on the left, you're going to see where it says sharpening. Please repeat after me. I will not touch sharpening. Just please don't. The reason why I'm laughing is because I used to add 100 sharpening, and once again, zoomed out, it doesn't look bad. Zoomed out, it looks totally fine. We zoom in, that does not look good. That is not flattering. That is not what you want to be doing to people and their skin tone. And that's where I had really had to learn this is because I was destroying what my people look like when I zoomed in. Now, the reason why I say don't touch it is because there's already an automatic amount of sharpening added. You don't really need to punch it. Just leave it alone, personally, guys. I don't anybody that I've had add a bunch of sharpening, I almost always tell them, please just change that, you know? After that, guys, the next one for detail is going to be noise. So going back into the digital noise thing, right? Let's see if I can find some. No, let me see if I can find a photo that has. So digital noise, guys, once again, is an imperfection. Oh, I think I might have one. Yeah, something here. Right, and that's from maybe a darker photo. Yeah, there we go. So if you look in kind of these darker parts, you're going to see kind of like these little like flecks. And here it's like super minor. I'm still shooting at 1250, kind of right there, right? Those little like imperfections is what we consider to be digital noise. And once again, I do have a higher end camera, so it's not as noticeable for probably me. But when we go into noise reduction under detail, sorry, here it is. You're going to see where it says luminance. If you just add a little bit of luminance, it's going to soften that up. And it's also going to soften the detail in your photos too, and then therefore just kind of reduce the noise a bit more, right? You don't want to do 100 because if you look at it, they look kind of like smooth skin, and that's not good either, right? If you don't want to take away from your photo too much, you might have to live with a little bit of noise. That's okay too, right? Yeah, that's just how you're going to be able to clean up a little bit of that. The last thing I'm going to go over, and we're just about to wrap up, guys, is going to be called is optics. So for me, where is it? Is it no lens corrections? But for you guys, it's called optics. I'm just going to point this out real quick, and we're going to finish on this. So guys, where it says optics, you're going to see two things. And focus. Okay. You're going to see enable lens corrections and then remove chromatic aberration. Honestly, guys, the one that I want you guys to have turned on is enable lens corrections. Now, why is that? I need to show you on my computer to really give you a good idea. But so when you enable, so this mine says enable profile corrections. It's the same thing. So what that is, watch when I turn it off. Do you see how my photo just changed? Let's go before. So this is with corrections on, and this is with corrections off. What you should notice is a natural vignette to my photo. And it's kind of like it just the proportions changed a little bit. And the reason being is because all lenses are going to have some sort of natural distortion and vignette to them. But what camera companies do is they make these profile corrections that you can add to your photo automatically, thankfully, to programs like, Photoshop, Lightroom, they work a lot better for this. I don't think Snapseed even has the profile correction. So that's another reason why I want you to be using Lightroom Mobile, so that you can fix those natural like imperfections and just kind of have a bit more of an easier photo to work with. If you like the natural distortion and the natural vignette for your camera, your lens, whatever you're using, cool, run with it. Nobody says you have to do profile corrections or to use it. I am just saying that while you are developing, it is probably a great idea to make it easy and consistent and straightforward and not have to work around correcting the vignetting and the distortion so that you have just an easier process of editing and working with your photos, right? Okay, guys, I know I'm just about to wrap up. The last thing I want to go over before I let you go is just the preset thing and then how to apply it and where to go from there. First things first, guys. Object removal, why I like doing it in photo and Lightroom is because AI generative removal is the best. It uses internet connection. You have to be connected to the internet, but it works so much better than anything. It works so much better than anything. So if you're going to try to get rid of it, I highly recommend just doing that. Okay, so guys, when we are going to add a preset for um, Lightroom Mobile, what you're going to do, guys, so those three dots, let me just stop this real quick. Those three dots in the top left, you click there, right? Hold on. Sorry. Uh, sorry, it's picture my girlfriend. You click there, and down here it's going to say copy settings or create preset. Guys, create your preset, and what you're going to get is something like this. It's going to be, typically it's going to be what you want to copy anyway, right? So you don't have to change it too much. Just let it, it's going to copy the major editing settings that you did. Save it as whatever name as you want, right? And then when you are trying to add it inside Lightroom Mobile, down here in the bottom, sorry, one sec. Down here in the bottom, there's like this Venn diagram with the two circles that are on top of each other, right? You click that, and then you can apply your preset, right? And so when you are, and let me just finish this real quick, guys. I'm sorry to take just a little bit more of your time. And then when you apply it to the next image, right? We'll go here. Let me just hold on. Create preset, reset. Cool. Go to your next image. You just click it, you apply it. Oh no, it doesn't look right. This looks awful. Well, instead of trying to just say that it looks awful, start with the color temperature. Start with the color temperature. Let's take it down, make it cooler because it was very warm. Let me take some of that magenta away. And what you should notice is that this is starting to look a little bit more of what I want it to be, right? Just a little bit more balanced, a little bit more natural, and a little bit more real. So that's why I just wanted to point this out. Start with color temperature first when you add your preset from photo to photo, because that might be the easiest fix. And that might be the best way that you can use it from photo to photo, and then obviously you just make your other changes and stuff that you feel like from there. Okay. All right, guys. Sweet. I am gonna wrap up there. I just didn't go too much over time. Does everybody feel, oh, it's the key difference between, I'm so sorry I missed that question. Vibrance and saturation. Saturation, it affects all the colors. All the colors a bit too much, right? Vibrance is going to affect the colors that are mainly within your image. Mainly within your image, right? So rather than affecting all the colors of the color wheel, like for example, this photo, it's affecting green, yellow, orange, red, right? Rather than doing all the other colors like, oh, and a little bit of blue too, right? Rather than punching everything else out. Okay, any other last questions? Are we all good, guys? Thumbs up. Thumbs up, thumbs up. Okay, sweet. All right, guys, I am gonna post these lectures inside Google Classroom. I'm gonna upload this one and get it posted sometime in the next day or two. But this is the start of the class, guys. Good luck with everything. I have a lot of hope for all of you. I'm excited to see the work that you guys come up with. And guys, please use me as a resource. Like I am 6 hours behind some of you, 3 hours behind others. So I am going to be available to a certain degree, right? And I would love to help you as much as I can. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Everybody take care. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.